So I wrestled with this title during the week. I wrote my rector's message on the back of the bulletin, and I used the title, All Things Are Possible for God. But I started thinking, that doesn't really get to the crux of the matter. Scripture tells us that nothing is impossible with God. So we deal with what is impossible. The word impossible has a different kind of positioning in our minds than the word possible. They're not opposites. The word impossible stands for something else. The gospel tells us that nothing is impossible with God. When I was in seminary, I met a minister who was very successful. He was in the suburbs of Chicago, and he grew his church, and they were building stuff, and kids were coming in. And then all of a sudden he quit. He gave it all up. Years later, he came and talked to us. And me being the kind of guy that I am, I said, hey, so what happened? Why did you quit after doing so good? He said he had a crisis of faith. And his crisis of faith began at the first chapter of Luke. He said, I just couldn't buy into the virgin birth anymore. It was impossible. Here is a man, a minister of God, who had a hard time buying into the virgin birth. And I think the better we know things, and the better we know how things work, the better we can see its limits. Now, there is, to the average person's understanding, only one way to have a baby. So any other way is impossible. And he was stuck into the impossibility of the virgin birth. Now, here's one of the beautiful things about the Episcopal Church. You don't have to believe in the virgin birth. Some of you out here may not believe it. But I'm going to tell you what I believe in. And you can let this marinate as you develop your own theology. When I look at the first chapter of Luke, I see a period of time where the prophets had been silent. The last prophet was the prophet Malachi, who wrote 400 years before Jesus' birth. And the prophet Malachi came to the people of Israel and he condemned the priests. He's like, the priests, you are not teaching the people to follow the law. Folks were bringing in, animals that were sick, that were about to die, that were crippled, they were bringing in the stuff that they didn't want to bring in. And the prophet Malachi said, wait, we got to stop this. The priests have got to demand more from the people. The priests have got to take this thing seriously. And I wonder why prophet after prophet after prophet could not move the hearts and minds of the people. I believe that they were afraid. I believe that the people were afraid, like, what if this law really isn't true? What if this law really is not going to work in my behalf? So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to make sacrifices, but I'm not going to sacrifice what I really want. I'm going to sacrifice this other stuff. And I can see God looking down and seeing where all the prophets had come up short. And he said, you know what? I'm going to send my son now. Because my son is going to show them something different. My son is going to show them the manifestation of my love and all the power and all the beauty that I want them to understand and I want them to share. But God needed a partner. If God sent his son down without coming through humanity, it wouldn't be the same. God needed to send his son, and he needed a partner. He needed a woman. And he met the virgin. Her name was Mary. Now, some of you have different theologies, and different people refer to Mary differently. Some people call her the Blessed Mother. Some folks call her the Madonna. Some people call her the Mother of God or the Mother of Mercy. Some folks call her Our Lady or the Queen of Heaven. Some people call her the Throne of Heaven. And yet others call her Virgin Mary, Mother of God. But the question is, what made Mary so special? Why do some people want to put Mary way up here on a pedestal? My brothers and sisters, Mary is special. Mary is a woman, a girl, a young girl, probably high school age, who had the courage to say yes, to partner with God. Mary said yes to the impossible. And I can imagine that angel Gabriel was walking around. What if Mary wasn't the first young lady that he went to? What if Gabriel gave this option to walk into the greatest of history to girl after girl, and they said, no, nope, not me, no thank you. Because think about what this represents. Think about what Mary agreed to. Mary agreed to, without her betrothed Joseph, to produce a child. Joseph probably would not believe what Gabriel said. Mary was faced with excommunication, being ostracized, and cast out for this opportunity to do something impossible. Mary is great because she said yes. She said yes to the impossible. She saw what God was doing. She saw the mission of God. And she said yes. I want us to think about the concept of being impossible. Not just the possibilities. Let's think about what it means to be impossible. The impossible is real. You look at what happened in Ferguson. And you saw that young man get murdered on the streets. But I can tell you what happened before that happened. Before that happened, the police force in that city, just like in the south, certain neighborhoods in the south side of Chicago, and certain neighborhoods in Anacostia, and cities all around America and all around the world, they wanted the people to know that it was impossible to resist their authority. There are neighborhoods and communities around the world where the police force are occupation force in that area. And they wanted those people to know that it was impossible to stand up against them. You see, the impossible is real. The impossible is that thing that's going to stop you. I can imagine going up in that neighborhood. If you're a young man, you might feel like it's impossible for me not to go to jail or get arrested or be harassed by the police. It's impossible. That is my limit. That is normal. That is what is going to happen. Some of us begin our careers and we get messages from our friends and our loved ones. Well, this is a cool place to work, but it's impossible for you to get a promotion. You just got to come to work and do your job, but they're not really into promoting anybody right now. It's impossible for you to go further. You see, these are limitations that are real, that are communicated to us. And the worst is that sometimes it's communicated with force, and sometimes it's communicated with love, but we know that we have limits. and we become acutely aware of what is impossible. Now, some of us getting ready for a big Christmas dinner and seeing our families. And some of us right now, sitting in this pew, feel that it's going to be impossible not to have fun. It's impossible that somebody's not going to get an attitude with somebody. It's impossible that folks ain't going to roll their eyes and have to go outside just to get away from him or her. It could be an aunt, your cousin, it could be your mother, your father, it could be your spouse, it could be that child of yours who just came home. It's going to be impossible for us to get along. I come in today, and there's one thing I want you to remember. If you don't remember anything else from this sermon, I'm telling you about how Mary embraced the impossible. I'm telling you about how Mary is our exemplar of faith. She had faith and she stood out and embraced the impossible. And I'm going to tell you how to do it. Do you want to know how to do it? I don't think all of y'all want to. Choir, do you want to know how to have strong faith? Choir's a little bit better, but let's try this again. Do you want to know how to have stronger faith? Yes. I'm going to tell you, do not be afraid. If you want to have strong faith, do not be afraid. Now you're asking me, all right, Reverend Ray, I'm going to follow you. But if you're talking about how to overcome the impossible, if you're talking about how not to be afraid, if you're talking about how to have fear, what is this not be afraid piece? I didn't say it. The angel Gabriel said it. The angel Gabriel walked up to Mary, and the first thing out of his mouth was, do not be afraid, Mary. My brothers and sisters, do not be afraid. You know, our lives, right now, your lives, all of our lives, are a sum total of the decisions that we have made. And right now, somewhere in the back of your mind, there's this thing that you may be hoping for. There may be this vision that you have, but you don't think it's going to happen. Because there's some part of that thing in your mind that is not possible. There's something about that thing in your mind, that vision in your mind, that is impossible. I'll tell you, some people believe that God has a plan for their lives. I think that's part of the story. But the larger part is I think that God has this larger mission in the earth. That God has this mission that he wants to carry out. And it's up to us to find a way to fit into that mission. Because we have free will. God can ask us to do something. That we can have this vision that God planted in our mind, but we still have the ability to say, no, no, no. And maybe we're not even saying no. Maybe we're just saying, that's impossible. I'm not saying no, but it just can't be done. It's impossible. Underneath that feeling of impossibility, underneath that thought of impossibility is fear. It's fear. Let that fear go. Let that fear go. If you have that vision in your mind and in your heart, let the fear go and pull into the mission of God. So I have been praying. Before I came to St. Luke's, I have been praying. Some of you heard this story before, but that's okay. You can hear it again. I have been praying, like, God, I want to be a rector. I don't want to be an assistant rector anymore. I hadn't been an assistant rector very long at all. I just did not like being an assistant rector. I was like, God, you call me? Because my original vision was that I was going to be a professor in Chicago, and I was going to have this church, and I was going to be dealing with the Chicago stuff. But then it hit me. I'm like, I need to be a rector. I need to be a rector. 3 angels. I had 3 angels contact me. First angel was Father Fisher, who was right here. He called me up. My wife was with me. It was on the 4th of July. He called me up and said, "Ray, I'm thinking about you at St. Luke's." I had not been a priest a year yet, right? And so in my mind, I was like, that's impossible. But I didn't say that, right? It's in the back of my mind. I'm not that kind of person. I'm the kind of person who said, yeah, okay, sure, let's go with it, right? But then I got a phone call from Father Shaw in Philadelphia. He's like, "Ray, you might want to consider St. Luke's." I'm like, uh-oh. That's 2. Then I had a conversation about something else with Bishop right in Atlanta before he was bishop. We were just talking about church stuff. And he was like, "You know what? You'd be great for St. Luke's." I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I had 3 angels come to me and take that little vision in my mind, that's something that I kind of thought was impossible. And I did. What I'm asking for you to do right now is to let me be the Gabriel. Let me be the angel Gabriel in your life right now. Brothers and sisters, that vision that you have in your mind is not impossible. That vision that you have in your mind right now is not impossible. There's something that you're thinking about right now. It is possible. Nothing is impossible with God. Look at Mary. Mary was younger than some of the young ladies in this choir. Scholars tell us that Mary was somewhere around 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. That lets you know how important our children are. I can't think of any group. I love all of y'all. But let's be clear, the children are important. The children are important because, before they make any mistakes, before they got to deal with the world, we got to get the word of God in them. We got to let them know about the scriptures. We got to let them know about the good news of Jesus Christ so that when the pressure hits, they are fortified. This church's been around a long time. And some of you all were little girls in this church and grew up in this church. Little boys in this church and grew up in this church. The most important time is those formative years. And there is no group in this church that's more important than our young folks. And I love you all for the way that you have embraced them and cared for them and nurtured them. Think about Mary. She was young. She was barely a teenager. She was not a biblical scholar. She was not a theologian. She was not a rabbi. But Mary grew up in church, and she was nurtured, and she knew her scriptures. And Mary was a believer. Look at the text from 2 Samuel. Mary read, "Your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." Mary knew that was what God was up to in prophecy. Mary knew that was God's mission on earth. And Mary saw an opportunity for her to participate in that mission with God. Mary saw that was her opportunity to participate in God's mission. Right now, God is calling each and every one of us into that mission that God has for humanity. All of us have different gifts. And God is calling all of us to use those gifts. You know how God is calling you. You know what God is calling you to do. Some of you are doing it, some of you are not doing it. I'm doing my best to catch up with what God is calling me to do. But God needs all of us. God needed the Virgin Mary. God needed Mary to participate in God's mission. God needs you and God needs me to participate in God's mission on earth. Mary was a believer, and she believed that nothing was impossible with God. My brothers and sisters, nothing is impossible with God. There was a time when people did not believe that you could travel around the world. But nothing's impossible for God. You know, there was a time when folks couldn't believe that human beings could soar through the air like birds. But nothing's impossible for God. There was a time when folks didn't believe that we could make it to the moon. But nothing is impossible with God. There was a time when folks didn't think that African Americans could be full citizens in the United States of America. But nothing's impossible for God. There was a time when folks didn't believe that a black man could become the president of the United States of America. But nothing is impossible with God.